This is CNN. Texas authorities have begun arresting migrants at a public park near the U.S.-Mexico border, official says. Texas authorities arrested migrants at Shelby Park in Eagle Pass, Texas, late Wednesday evening and charged them with criminal trespassing, marking the first arrests of migrants since the state took control of the area at the U.S.-Mexico border last week, an official said. The arrests were announced by Lieutenant Chris Olivares. How do you pronounce it? Olivares. At the Texas Department of Public Safety on social media, where he also posted videos on X. We get it. Single adult migrant men and women were taken into state custody, while migrant families and children were transferred to U.S. Border Patrol. I'm hearing that the Texas planes and buses that were shipping migrants to various cities have either stopped or slowed. Around the same time, the state has begun arresting the illegal immigrants. Okay, my friends, social breakdown. The federal government declares the international borders are their authority. And I believe that is the case, but they are also obligated under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution to defend states from invasion. The federal government is facilitating invasion, not doing their duty. So Texas says, we no longer adhere to what you are claiming. Texas is now solely enforcing the law on their border, passing a law saying that they have the authority and jurisdiction on this international border. The federal government sues them saying, no, you don't. Texas deploys armed National Guardsmen to bar federal agents from the border, from the river. And we have the makings of the grains of sand are being added to the heap of secession.
Wow. So
does this escalate to the point where Texas eventually declares independence? It may. All of these small moments when, I always use this analogy. How many grains of sand make a heap? Mm-hmm. What we are watching right now is Texas asserting its own authority over an international border. Texas deploying armed soldiers to bar federal agents from what the federal agents claim is their jurisdiction. If the federal government backs down and gives up, this just shatters confidence in the federal government. Yeah. If they want to, so what does that mean for other states? Next, you get New Mexico, Arizona, other states being like, well, the federal government has no authority anymore. They've given up. Yeah. And they'll start asserting their own authority. Or the federal government shows up in force with guns and says, stand down. And if that happens, we have to ask, will Texas stand down or will Texas say, F you, no?
Right.
And where does that lead?
That's really fascinating.
I feel like we're Americans. It seems like America as a whole is going back to, I don't want to make it seem like it's radical, but kind of its roots in its culture of just keeping the government accountable. And if you won't take care of this nation, we will. Because that's kind of how the founding fathers were. I feel like just Americans as a whole, they're going to start making the founding fathers proud. And that's not saying to start a revolution or anything, or even no promotion of it. But
stand on your rights.
Yeah, they're standing on the rights, and they're telling the government they've taken too much power, give it back to the states.
I mean, this was Abbott's criticism of immigration for a long time now, that there are laws in the books that the federal government could choose to enforce, and they don't. In fact, they have let this become a increasingly burdensome problem for the states to deal with, and then telling states they can't do anything to stop it. And so I think in some ways this rise of, a state governor that is willing to do something is inspirational. I think it's more likely that border states would follow suit. And I actually wonder if it's going to be the states along the northern border that are going to do something.
Well, they should do something too.
Right. They're seeing a wave of immigration as well. I mean, at a certain point, it's a danger to people who...
Yeah, there's the Canadian border's not doing well
People
either.
will fly to Canada and cross through the northern border.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The other thing too is a lot of what's going on in terms of family separation and just releasing migrant kids and releasing the people who travel with migrant kids, creating essentially a golden ticket for adults who bring kids across the border. It's not a law. It's a judge. It's a Flores settlement that went through in 1987 and then has been consistently challenged and back and forth, where I think it was it was under the Obama administration. There was this Judge Gee or maybe it's G in California, who said that because of the Flores settlement says that you have to release illegal immigrant children without any real delay, that meant that you also have to release the adults that came with them. So it created this golden ticket situation where the Border Patrol, the DHS, is required to release children under this agreement. And if they're releasing children, they have to release the adults too. And that's actually how the family separation thing happened, because under Obama, it was like, okay, you have to release illegal immigrant children, so let's separate them so that we can release the children and detain the adults that came with them. And then that was changed. So I don't know why everyone's holding to this ruling by a radical judge? Why is that what's being upheld? It's pretty weird.
I think we're about to start seeing a lot of positive domino effects. From the last about 12 years, we've seen a negativity of domino effects, and nothing, I don't care what someone does with their sexuality, but there has been a downward spiral in America after Obama legalized homosexual marriage. At first, I do distinctly remember the LGBTQ community simply only asking for the right to be married. After that, they started asking for representation in television, and it went from television to kid TV shows, and went from kid TV shows to going to preschools and etc. So it's a domino effect of just legalizing the marriage itself, or even
it wasn't Obama; it was the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
but it was in the Obama administration.
Obergefell. Yeah, it was Obergefell. The decision.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
Look, the domino effect, the slippery slope. These things are real. They happen, and so everything we're seeing now with Texas on the border. I want to make sure it's clear. I'm not actually predicting anything. I'm saying if X, then Y. And what I said several months ago is if Texas is arguing that the federal government has abandoned them, sooner or later, they're going to send law enforcement to go and do this themselves. Well, then they did. It's not so much that I'm saying like I have a vision and I see this. There's multiple things that could happen here. Federal government could win a lawsuit. Texas backs down. We have no idea. But we can say these things all move in one direction. So we're going to see Texas, now they're making arrests. Sooner or later, we're going to see the federal government retaliate in some way. You have no authority to detain these people. Could it escalate to the most extreme? What if the federal authorities go to local jails and bring guns and say, transfer these people into our custody? Texas says, no, you're going to release them into our state. And the federal government says, we don't care what you think. Release them now into our custody. These things could happen.
But they don't have any jurisdiction over state prisons. They only have jurisdiction over federal.
The argument is that the state has no jurisdiction over illegal immigration. Yeah. So the federal government would be saying, you have illegally detained people that are under our jurisdiction.
Could you really see Biden's DHS being like, we're going to get the guns? All they know is lawfare. That's what they do consistently.
I don't know. Perhaps it's very, very simple, and the answer is no. The federal government backs down. If that's the case, other states are going to say then the federal government is impotent and incapable of enforcing anything.
How many times have they backed
down?
So. Truthfully, how many times can I remember? Can we remember in recorded history?
The federal government backing down?
Yeah, our government backing down.
Well, I remember like Ruby Ridge. You know, I remember the federal government refusing to back down to such a degree they kill a bunch of kids at
Waco,
and Waco as well, yeah. So I suppose the issue here is that we're dealing with state law enforcement versus federal. But again, 1860, right? 1861, more precisely. That ideally and hopefully, Donald Trump gets elected. He then goes to Texas and says, our forces are at your disposal. And then there's no longer animosity and there's no longer a clash. But right now, the Biden administration is facilitating an invasion and facilitating illegal immigration and human smuggling. Texas is trying to do its best to stop the criminal activity of the Biden administration, but only insofar as it affects their state. Sooner or later, we have to reconcile with this country that the Biden administration is a criminal enterprise facilitating human smuggling, and they've been doing it for years.
They have been. It's like 10 million people.
They're flying children on planes. They are smuggling to such an extreme degree. They're trafficking children.
Yeah, from Venezuela and all over the
late
place.
At night.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because you have the Democrats freaking out when Trump says that there's going to be a mass deportation event and people are going to be held before they're deported. And then you have Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, saying, you know what we're going to do because there's all this crime around the illegal immigrant shelters. We're going to put in curfews at these shelters. And it's like, so you're making a detention camp for migrants where they can't leave, right? That's what you're doing. So Eric Adams is going to do it. And one thing that's interesting, too, is we see that happening a lot with Democrat mayors where they are forced to use the same tactics that everyone's decrying. What's his name? Johnson in Chicago as well.
I wonder how extensive their motives of getting to the country is. I know they also dig to go from underground and come back up. I just wonder how organized they have it now. Just the illegal immigrants.
It's very organized because all they have to do is show up and they're let in.
Well, yeah, you have that too. Yeah.
Like, who needs a tunnel? They're just going to open the door. You see Border Patrol like putting ladders up to like help people climb over.
There's a video of Border Patrol opening the gate and letting them in.
Yeah.
Onto private property too.
Because they'll say it's too dangerous. Like, we have to help them because otherwise they might fall and hurt themselves.
I want to see Texas National Guard start arresting the CBP guys.
It'd be interesting. I mean, I think it's more likely that the federal agents, I would like to see them defect to the state level. I would like to see them leave their jobs. I mean, obviously they work in an industry, you know, if your expertise is working on the border, just go to the agency that's actually enforcing the law that's allowing you to.
I do not understand how there are men and women in law enforcement in the state of Texas who are actually on the ground dealing with this every day. And they have not reached the point where they're just like, we got to start arresting these feds. They are human traffickers. I don't care if they're wearing a badge. They are human traffickers, and they are armed. It's time to start arresting them for facilitating human trafficking.
It is human trafficking directly. And the cartels advertise on TikTok and Facebook. And and there was just a story that we were looking at the other day. Taylor Hansen did it, where it turns out that
Cops are
Catholic
helping.
charities contracted cops in San Antonio to like facilitate human smuggling and human trafficking.
Watch Taylor Hansen's reporting on Tenet Media. We have the Culture War show tomorrow morning on Tenet Media, but Taylor Hansen has uncovered a lot. Police officers using public equipment to facilitate human trafficking. I mean, dude, it is insane. I just don't understand. I really don't. We are watching abject evil. This is not like a cop took a bribe. These are police officers in their vehicles using public equipment to protect and facilitate human smuggling operations. This is not me being cute. Human trafficking, okay, strong language. Human smuggling, definitive, 100%. There was a story I pulled up from the DOJ from several years ago where two guys in the military went to prison for transporting illegal aliens. We now have the entirety of the Biden administration facilitating the whole DHS. And I'm just, okay, I get it. Perhaps Texas briefed their guys and said, guys, we got to do this one very, very carefully to avoid dramatic escalation, but here's the move we're going to make. If I was in Texas Sheriff's Department or National Guard or whatever, I just walk up to a CBP guy and be like, put your hands behind your back. I don't care. I'm just, you know what, man, people always make excuses for cops. Always make excuses. They say, oh, you know, cops can't choose what law to enforce. Okay, if that was the case, all of these guys would be in jail in Texas the moment a CBP. Look, let me ask you guys something. If you're in a cartel gang and you're seen driving around a cartel vehicle and you're armed, do you think the cops are gonna go, well, he's not doing anything, so I'm gonna leave him alone? Or do you think they're gonna be like, that's a cartel vehicle and that guy's got a gun? We're going to pull him over and investigate. This is cartel activity. Yeah. If you were part of, like, let's say Al-Qaeda, okay, a big ISIS truck with an ISIS flag is driving through Texas and a bunch of guys with guns are mounted on the back. Do you think the cops are going to be like, I can't really enforce anything against these guys? They're at the very least going to investigate and say probable cause. ISIS is a terrorist organization. So that gives us the probable cause right to stop them. Turns out you have right to keep and bear arms. You have right to free speech. We got something interesting going on here. But terrorist organizations are a line. If local law enforcement at state level knows that all of the CBP and federal law enforcement have been facilitating cartel activity and human smuggling, for what reason do they decide I'm not going to even stop and question these guys?
Yeah.
It is because they're like, well, he's wearing a badge. Yeah, if a clown walked up to you wearing a badge, I'd say screw off. At a certain point, we need the law to be enforced. They're doing it. I can respect it, but I don't see why they're giving a free pass to the criminals in the Biden administration who've been facilitating this.
I agree. That's why I think that it's so bizarre that you won't even have the Republicans in Congress bring up the potential impeachment against Mayorkas. MTG keeps saying, like, let's impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. He's destroying our border.
They're holding all the hearings right now.
Yeah, they're holding hearings, but they haven't gone for it, and I don't know why. They could have had him out of office.
Yeah.
10 months ago. They could have had him
people
office
have introduced
a year ago. Yeah, it's happened.
It's happened multiple. I think it's happened at least. I can think of maybe 4 times.
They can't get a vote on it.
I don't know why. I mean, it just seems like the most obvious thing. I also don't understand why, in a show of good faith, the Biden administration wouldn't be like, "Okay, Mayorkas, you got to step down because we have angered everyone." Like they could
because they want
also
it.
rotate,
but they want it.
But they could fake you out with like, "Oh, well, we listened to you. We're trying to compromise." Because their thing always is Republicans aren't willing to compromise. We just heard this from J.B. Pritzker the other day. He was was like, he put that complaint to Abbott in the
You mean when
newspaper.
he begged Greg Abbott to stop sending
Yes,
illegal
he was like,
immigrants
stop
to
sending them
Illinois?
because you don't respect humanity, and I can't believe you would do this, and it's cold here. To agree to a bipartisan solution, right? Like, they are always saying Republicans are the ones who aren't willing to compromise, when for Republicans this is a hard issue. You have to close the border.
You have to close the border. And it's interesting that you had Chuck Schumer saying that there would be no border deal without money for Ukraine. It's like that
These
makes
people are pure
absolutely
evil.
no sense.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.